Okay, this project is in the hi-fi domain. This is my Earmax headphone amp, which is very nice, except it comes with a wall wart. And as you've heard me say before, I really don't like wall warts at all. So, what we're going to do is take this headphone amp, put it with its wall wart or its power supply, and we're going to build a nice base to go under this where the yon power supply will be hidden. So we'll end up with something like this. Probably completely the scale is all wrong, but you get the idea. I have a specific piece of wood in mind for building this base underneath, and I've had it for a while, but I didn't want to use it for anything because I couldn't think of something nice enough that I would use it for. But I think this is the perfect project for it. So let's have a look at that. So the raw materials for this project, at least in theory, centers around this very old plank of 1-inch thick rosewood that I got a couple of years ago from one of my brothers who has a serious wood shop. So at first glance it doesn't look that seriously impressive, but you can see when it was resawn, the blade certainly didn't cut through it like butter. It gave it a hard time. And when you go scratch below the surface, you get to see what the actual wood really looks like. So I'm not sure the origin of this, but it looks like there was another piece of lighter wood glued onto it up this edge. Because when I take a razor file and it will just file away the lighter wood like butter, and then you get to the rosewood and it's like you're trying to file steel. Yeah, this plank of wood probably weighs about the same as a steel RSJ of the same size. It really does. It's just amazingly heavy piece of wood. The other challenge with rosewood, as many of you will know, is it totally destroys your tools. And so in its current form it's much too thick for the project here, except maybe the base. I might leave the base that thick. And I don't have a bandsaw, so I can't. So I'm going to resaw it. I don't know. I do have a thicknesser, but again, I'm not sure it's up to this type of wood. So, plenty of challenges on that score. So I got to go think and figure it out. The good news initially is it's at least 150 mil across here. And that's really the size of the base, or the size of the base and the top would be 150 mil square. And so in theory, so long as I don't have to get rid of too much of it to square it up, it'll work to my original dimensions. Well, as expected, this rosewood is proving great fun to try and work. I tried the safety planer first. I think we got one good cut to, take a skim off, and then when I went through the second cut, it got about halfway through, and then it got harder and harder and harder to push the wood through, so edge completely gone off the blades. Yeah, I was just going to be burning my way through the wood. So, I have to resharpen this guy. So I tried my Swiss plane, which uses like replaceable, they're kind of like heavy duty razor blades, so you don't sharpen them. So I put a new blade in this. No, didn't really want to do anything. With my regular Stanley, yes, I could make it cut, but the wood started the rosewood started to tear, which was a no-no. Now they say you need a toothed blade in your plane if that happens. I don't have one of those, so we're wheeling out the heavy-duty router, which I normally never have any need for, but I figured for something like this, we'd go with some fairly heavy duty stuff with a 1/2 inch shaft and give ourselves a chance. So I just made a little bit of a jig here to hold this piece in place. A couple of runners and a cross piece which is fixed to the router, and we'll see if we can skim off some of this and see if the router will be any good. Okay, I think we'll proceed. We'll keep going with this because it doesn't look to be chipping it out. Finish is reasonable. And so yeah, we'll keep going with this. Okay, that seems to work. The only trouble is you get toxic rosewood dust everywhere. So beautiful wood though. So it'll be worth it in the end. So yes, and it'll be different depending on how the light catches it and all that stuff. So yeah, I think we'll stick with this method, and so far the old router bit sharpness seems to be holding up. Didn't quite get down to the end here, but I might do one more cut, I might not, we'll see. Right, that's that bit. Cup of tea, I think. Well, it's hard work, guys, but it's nice to know that out of something as plain looking as this on the surface, you get something like this, which is, from my perspective, outstandingly beautiful piece of wood. Yep. Still, a lot of work. So this is what we're aiming for, something to make this little guy look somewhat more sophisticated. So I put a bit of beeswax on the rosewood just to bring the grain up a little bit, and I think it looks really cool. So yes, one is motivated to continue. Okay, so here we are. Here is the base piece, or what is hopefully going to be the base and the top. So I'm going to rip it, or I'm going to try and rip it using the table saw. So I figure I'd sort of make very shallow cuts and raise the blade a little bit at a time and see how far I can go from each side and maybe from each end. I'm not going to go all the way through with it because that would be I'd be a bit too nervous doing that, I think. So once I get it, I don't know, maybe a third of the way through, then the rest I'll probably do just with the Japanese pull saw, because they are very sharp, and it needs sharpness is key for this. So next I have to look at the distance between the base and the top. So this will obviously sit on the top, and yon wallwart is going to be inside. But I don't want it sitting inside this ugly plastic case. The other downside with this particular design is that there's no on-off switch on the amp. The on-off switch is on the wallwart. And it's nice that you have an on-off switch on it, that you can actually completely switch it off. But it means in use you can't hide this away around the back. It has to be somewhere to hand so that you can switch it on and off. Just one more reason why this conversion is the thing to do. So next is to take all this out of here. Hope it's not filled with well, it doesn't matter if it's filled with gunk or whatever. I just got to get it out of here and make the dimensions so I know the minimum clearance I'm going to need to put the power supply inside. So it looks like we have a transformer with a diode and resistor and an LED. Okay, so this all looks cool. We'll take all this apart, take some photos, undo the cabling, and get this circuit board out of here, and get rid of this plastic case. Yeah, it's well made, generally very well made. The guy even put little crimps on the end of the cable. There we go. Nothing terribly complicated. The one other design area that I was thinking of is what to make the side walls of the cabinet out of. Obviously one choice is to use more of this, but I was thinking that maybe something like Corian would be nice, because it's kind of like a stone effect, and I think the combination of the dark wood and this Corian might look really badass, because we are going for a certain badass here. Again, the only trouble is this is way too thick, but that's okay. I think we'd figure this out. I don't have any experience of cutting and milling this stuff, but that'd be part of the fun of learning how to do that. So that's my thinking. So next task is to rip this and have a top and a bottom. So halfway through the ripping process. So far so good. So I nibbled, if you like, in progressive cuts on the table saw up to about here. So that's how far up out of this table the saw blade was sticking. Once I got to that point, I got a little bit nervous that there was an awful lot of saw blade exposed, and pushing this through, because it's higher than it is wide, when you're ripping or cutting across the short side, it's very high up, so just a regular push stick just wasn't going to give the control, so I had to use both hands to keep it accurately pressed against the bed and against this side table as it went through. So having had to cut all around, I then used the saw to just cut out the rest, and obviously having a nice wide cut, or because of the thickness of the table saw blade, that acted as a guide for the handsaw. And so I used the Chinese saw, as I said, and if any of you guys are up for this, the trick is you want to use the fine-toothed blade, and you want to cut across the grain and not with the grain. I won't say it went through it like butter, but it cut it. So here we are. So this will go back into my little jig here for the router, and we'll do, level up both of these cut sides, and we'll be ready for figuring out how we build the sides of this little enclosure. Well, it took a little bit of work, but we have a top and a bottom. And I gotta say, I think the inside looks just as nice as the outside. I'm assuming this is why the wood was not used for furniture back in the day when everyone got relegated to construction, because the grain is, the dark pattern is not consistent. However, I think this is just beautiful. One might argue the variation in color is more attractive than the dark, consistent color, and so one could make a case for putting the dark side on the inside, but you know, we'll stick with tradition here. So we'll just have to pick which is the top. So I think this one's going to be the top, because there's a slight blemish on the back corner here, so this will be the bottom. And also there's some breakout here, so I'm hoping that I'll be able to put a 45-degree bevel all around here that'll get rid of a lot of that. That's for later. still working on, are we going to do Korean or are we going to do, I kind of like it, so I'm thinking we're going with the Korean here. Okay, I'm going to measure it up and see what's the optimum way to cut this so I have minimum waste, and then see where we go from there. Okay, I think the proportions are working out okay. I mean, it's outsized because I intend to bevel each of the corners, so it'll be less, there'll be more clearance all around here when we're done. But overall, I think we carry on. I like the look of this when it's all polished up and everything. I think it's going to look okay. Right. Well, luckily this stuff, this Korean, you can pretty much machine it like you would just regular hardwood. So the table saw cuts it, the chop saw cuts it nicely without any harm. So I'm assuming the router will do the same, and I want to do my 45 bevels on each corner. So a bit of progress. The Korean is all glued up at this point, so I'm mounting it to the base piece here. And so what I've done is I've drilled 6 holes to screw up from underneath, and I have located the Korean where I think it needs to be, and I'm just going to use this setup here to make little marks with a drill to indicate where the holes need to be in the Korean, and then I'll take it all apart and drill the holes properly. So here it is, glued up, and I decided to reuse the pieces from the wall wart. So here's the on-off switch. This will be the AC in, this will be the DC out, and I decided that I like the color variation on this surface, and so he said frantically changing it around. I want to put that color variated wood here at the front. Next step is drill these pilot holes for the mounting screws. The bit I still have to figure out is how I'm gonna secure the top plate onto the Korean, because obviously I don't want any screws coming in from the top here, and so right now what I'm thinking of maybe doing is cutting a piece of wood exactly the same as the inside here, gluing it on the base, and then having it fit like that, and maybe putting a bit of glue on it. But I want at least one surface to be removable, so the base here will be removable in case anything goes wrong. So the latest learning is screwing into Korean is not straightforward. It's very hard and brittle. And so the tolerance on the hole size for the screw is very, very critical. So luckily I did a lot of test drilling of different hole sizes to find out which ones give me the best chance of success. And the other thing I discovered is because it's so, how can I put it, stony type in nature, because it's so hard and powdery, the screw does not want to cut through it. However, some grease on the threads and we're good. When I take it off again later, because I'm going to have to route a chamfer on the base all the way around, I'll take the paper off. This is just to make sure my holes all lined up okay. And these screws are a little proud, but there will be 4 feet on the bottom here to hold this up off the mounting surface. So here is the idea with the subframe. So that fits in here. and effectively I'll glue this to it and then locate it all. So as well as having the glue surfaces around, sorry, I put it in the right way, I keep getting the top and bottom mixed up here. So yeah, I'll fix this to this, and then as well as having glue around the edges, I'll have the inner side as well, because the surface on the inside is much rougher, and so it's going to give a much better hold when I put the glue on it. Now the only thing here is I think I probably need to cut out the center of this, because I haven't allowed all that much clearance on top of the power supply, and so there's a chance this would hit the transformer. So I think we'll cut this out of there. So you get the idea. I'll probably do it in 2 stages. Locate the top versus the frame first and glue the insert to it, and then if that all goes well, I'll glue the whole thing to the top. Sorry, I'll glue the whole thing to the frame. So I've positioned the plate here correctly, and then I've put 2 pins which go into very tiny locating holes underneath for the glue, for locating this piece, and then we'll clamp it and glue it up and take the pins out when we're done. So for fixing the headphone amp itself to the top, I figured a single bolt is going to be enough, because these rubber feet are quite, I feel like, high-tech, so there's not going to be any tendency for this thing to rotate once I tighten it down. So it's just a 3mm bolt through the base, and glued so that you can turn the nut from underneath, because obviously you can't get it this side. I'm not sure what material this is, but it is extremely hard steel, so my drill bit did drill the hole, but I don't think that drill bit will be cutting too much more. And fitting it on is a little bit tricky, because because as well as these screws going through the base plate, it's got these spacers on it, which are effectively used to hold the PCB up against the top surface. So a little bit finicky to locate. There we go, that's that bit. So the next bit, I think, before we're almost ready for final assembly, I just have to do the 45 degree chamfer all around here, top and bottom, and then we're good. Right, that's the chamfers cut around the edges, top and bottom. I think it looks pretty neat. Okay, we'll let the Loctite just leave it a minute to go off before we go doing any more. And of course this guy we got to cut real short. And that's my only risk or nervousness about this redesign, is that the proximity of the power supply to the amp might cause interference. Hopefully not though, it's because it's got a metal base, linear power supply with a shielded transformer, so hopefully we're gonna be okay. So there we go, all wired up for an initial listening test to see if this thing still works after all the trauma I've been putting it through. So I'm just going to rest the top on and then plug the amp in and see if it still works after all this. Well guys, it plays just fine. I let it run for about half an hour. There's no ventilation for the power supply, but after half an hour, when I took the lid off here and felt the transformer, it's a little bit warm, but it's not like baking hot or anything. So I'd say we'll be okay. So here's the final finish on the top. I'll give it a couple of more rounds of polish, but this is just a coat of beeswax, which we've let dry thoroughly and then buffed off, and we let it harden up some more and buff it a few more times. We should be good. So we're in the home stretch. I put some protective feet on it. Put a little zip tie to hold the AC cable away from the transformer, just in case. No point in overheating it unnecessarily. And so the amp itself is now fixed to the top with a bolt and a nut and some Loctite to stop it coming undone. And so all that remains is to glue the top onto here, and we're all pretty much done. So finally, there it is. I put glue down along each side, but not front and back, because there is minuscule clearance in various places around the bottom. And I thought if I leave the potential for some tiny spaces on the top, we might get some minimum airflow through there, just in case heat becomes a problem. So as I say, we'll let the glue dry here, and then we'll give it one final test, and hopefully we'll be all done with this one. Okay guys, here is the finished article in a somewhat more appropriate setting than on my grubby workshop bench. So I've just been testing it out on my everyday Sennheiser HD650s. I don't know if I mentioned it along the way, but this is actually a gift for someone, so I hope they like it. So this project won't get posted on YouTube for another 2.5 months maybe, because obviously the person who's going to get this doesn't know that it's coming, and they won't get to do it until for a couple of months yet. So this will be edited up and put on hold until all that's over and done with. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed following this along. Hope you found at least some of it interesting, and I guess the next project I'm going to get started on, you'll know all about that long before you see this particular project, so no need to say any more about that at this point. So thanks a lot for watching guys. Cheers for now, bye.